The afternoon sun hovered low over the quiet town of Maple Ridge, turning the cracked asphalt into a shimmering mirage. Cars rarely passed this far out, just long stretches of country road lined with dying cornfields and rusting mailboxes. On most days, silence ruled here, broken only by the chirp of crickets or the occasional bark of a dog from some distant porch. But that day, a sleek black Cadillac sat on the shoulder, its hood propped open, engine lifeless. Inside, Eleanor Hayes, a woman in her late 60s, sat fanning herself with an old church bulletin, her face tight with frustration. Her phone displayed no service. Not a single bar. She cursed under her breath, her once perfect patience worn thin by heat and time. Eleanor was not a woman used to waiting. She'd been a bank manager for 30 years before retiring, the kind who lived by order, schedules, and control. But out there, on that empty stretch of road, control was the one thing she didn't have. She closed her eyes, exhaling sharply, when she heard it. Footsteps crunching on gravel. A young man approached, maybe 17 or 18, lean and dark-skinned, wearing a torn denim jacket and boots that looked a size too big. Sweat glistened on his brow, but his posture carried quiet confidence, as if hardship had long ago taught him how to stand tall. "Ma'am, you need some help?" he asked, voice calm but respectful. Eleanor hesitated. His sudden presence startled her, and for a fleeting second, fear flickered in her chest. But there was something steady in his gaze, kind, clear, honest. "Car won't start," she said finally, her tone clipped. "And I don't have service." He nodded once. "Mind if I take a look?" The boy leaned under the hood, inspecting the tangle of belts and wires like someone who had done it more times than he could count. His fingers were quick but careful, moving with the kind of focus that comes from necessity, not training. Eleanor watched from the driver's side, still clutching her purse, half trust, half fear. After a few minutes, he stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Battery's dead," he said. "If you've got cables, I can give you a jump. My uncle's truck is down the road." She blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "You have a car?" "Not mine," he replied with a small smile. "I fix things for folks around here. Helps me get by." There was no arrogance in his tone, just simple truth. His name, she'd soon learn, was Malik Carter. Eleanor followed him down the dirt path where an old pickup sat parked beneath a sycamore tree, paint faded, engine coughing as it started. He pulled it beside her Cadillac and attached the cables with steady hands. The car sputtered, then came alive, engine humming again. She exhaled in relief, a genuine smile creeping across her face. "You're a lifesaver." Malik shrugged, unplugging the cables. "Just doing what I can." As he packed up the cables, Eleanor studied him closely. His jacket was worn at the elbows, his sneakers half untied. She noticed grease stains under his nails and a small scar running across his knuckles. Yet beneath the weariness, his eyes carried a steadiness, a calm older than his years. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. "Here," she said. "For your trouble." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. I don't take money for helping." That caught her off guard. "Don't be silly. It's just a thank you." He gave a faint smile, stepping back. "Then thank you for letting me help." For a long moment, Eleanor sat behind the wheel, watching the boy disappear into the golden haze of the afternoon. The road stretched endlessly before her, but something in her chest felt heavier than before. That night, back in her polished suburban home, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The boy with grease on his hands and light in his eyes. She had spent her whole life saving money, managing accounts, ensuring people didn't take advantage of her generosity. But Malik, he didn't want anything. Not money. Not thanks. Just to help. She couldn't explain why that bothered her, or why it moved her so deeply. Maybe because somewhere along the way, she had stopped believing people like that existed. The next morning, the air in Maple Ridge carried that heavy stillness that comes after a long, humid night. A faint fog clung to the fields as Eleanor Hayes eased her Cadillac down the familiar country road, her hands steady on the wheel but her mind miles away. She wasn't entirely sure why she was driving back out there. Logic said yesterday's encounter was over, just a small act of kindness from a stranger. But her heart, a part of her she hadn't listened to in years, said otherwise. She couldn't shake the image of the boy. The way he stood in the sunlight, face calm, voice steady, turning down money as if it meant nothing. People didn't do that anymore. Not in her world, at least. The road curved gently past an abandoned gas station, its faded "open" sign still hanging crooked in the window. That's where she saw it, a familiar old pickup truck parked beneath the same sycamore tree from yesterday. She slowed, scanning the yard nearby. A small white house sat behind the trees, its porch cluttered with bicycles, worn boots, and flower pots. Laundry flapped lazily on a line. She hesitated, feeling oddly nervous, then parked at the edge of the drive. The front door opened before she could even step out. A woman in her late 30s appeared, wiping her hands on a towel, her expression cautious but kind. "Can I help you?" she called. Eleanor stepped closer, smoothing her blouse. "Good morning. I'm sorry to bother you, but I met a young man yesterday, Malik? He helped me with my car." The woman's face softened instantly, pride flickering in her eyes. "That sounds like my boy. He's always fixing something for someone." "You said he helped you?" "Yes," Eleanor nodded. "He wouldn't take a dime for it. I wanted to thank him properly." The woman smiled, gesturing toward the yard. "You'll find him out back. He's been up since sunrise tinkering with that old lawn mower again." She followed the sound of clanking metal until she saw him. Malik Carter, 17, crouched beside a rusted mower, hands stained with oil, humming softly to himself. He looked up, surprised, when he noticed her standing there. "Ma'am? You came back." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Seems I did. I couldn't stop thinking about what you did yesterday." He shrugged, sitting back on his heels. "It wasn't much." "It was," she said firmly. "At least to me." Malik wiped his hands and stood, a hint of shyness in his movements. "I'm just glad your car started up fine." Eleanor hesitated. "Can I ask how you learned all that? You looked like a professional out there." He laughed softly. "No ma'am, nothing like that. My dad taught me some before he passed. Been fixing things ever since." Her expression faltered. "I'm sorry to hear that." He nodded, eyes distant for a moment. "It's all right. My mom works a lot, so I do what I can to help." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The morning breeze carried the scent of cut grass and engine oil. The yard was simple but well kept, the kind of place built on effort, not money. A cracked basketball hoop leaned near the fence, and a faded school jersey hung from a clothesline. "You play sports?" she asked, nodding toward it. "Used to," Malik said. "Coach says I've got good reflexes, but I work after school most days. Gotta keep the lights on." Eleanor's heart tightened. "You shouldn't have to worry about that at 17. He smiled, almost as if he'd heard it before. "Maybe. But it's life." She found herself studying him again, not just the grease and worn clothes, but the calm dignity behind his words. It reminded her of someone she used to be before years of ambition hardened her heart. When Malik's mother came back out, she invited Eleanor to stay for a glass of sweet tea. The kitchen was small but bright, filled with sunlight and the faint sound of gospel radio. Photographs lined the counter. Malik at 8 years old, missing a front tooth. Malik holding a school trophy. Malik standing next to a man who must have been his father. Eleanor took a slow sip of her drink, her eyes tracing the details. "You've raised a good young man," she said softly. Malik's mother smiled. "He's got his daddy's heart. Never turns down a soul in need." For the first time in years, Eleanor felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. A reminder of everything money couldn't buy: humility, connection, grace. Outside, the sound of laughter echoed from the yard. Malik had fixed the mower and now pushed it across the patchy grass, his younger sister chasing behind, pretending to race him. Eleanor stood at the window, watching. The image lingered like a snapshot from a simpler time, one she didn't realize she missed. When she finally turned to leave, Malik jogged up to the porch. "You sure you don't want me to check your car again before you go?" he teased. She laughed, shaking her head. "No, I think it'll start just fine today." But she paused, looking at him more seriously. "You ever think about what comes next for you, Malik? After school?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sometimes. I want to build things, maybe study engineering. But college costs money." Eleanor nodded slowly, eyes glinting with thought. "You should hold on to that dream," she said. "I'm trying, ma'am," he replied with a grin. "One day at a time." As she drove away, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes soft, heart strangely light. The boy had helped her fix her car, yes. But in some small way, he was fixing something in her, too. For days after leaving Maple Ridge, Eleanor Hayes couldn't shake the boy from her mind. Malik's voice echoed in her thoughts. Maybe study engineering. But college costs money. It wasn't a plea, just a statement of fact. Still, something in the way he said it, calm, resigned, too old for 17, had lodged itself deep inside her. At 62, Eleanor had lived a life of means. She'd built companies, attended galas, donated to faceless charities. But no cause had ever felt as personal as that quiet backyard in Maple Ridge. She found herself pacing her kitchen late one night, tea untouched, staring out the window at the city lights. The next morning, Eleanor made a call to an old friend, David Carter, a retired contractor who still took the occasional project for fun. "I need a small favor," she said. "And before you ask, no, it's not business." She told him about Malik. The boy's kindness. His dream. The house in Maple Ridge that leaned slightly to the left but felt full of right things. David chuckled softly. "You always did have a soft spot for lost causes." "Maybe," Eleanor replied. "But some causes aren't lost. They're just waiting for someone to notice." Within a week, she'd arranged everything, anonymously. Malik's school fees for the next semester were paid. An envelope arrived at his mailbox with no return address, containing a single note that read, "Keep building. The world needs what you can create." 3 weeks later, Eleanor returned to Maple Ridge under the pretense of visiting a nearby property. She parked outside the Carter's home just as Malik came running down the porch steps, holding the envelope in his hand. His face was lit with disbelief and joy. "Mom, somebody paid my school fees," he shouted. His mother appeared at the doorway, wiping her eyes. "Baby, that's a blessing from above." Eleanor sat in her car across the street, hidden behind her sunglasses, watching. She smiled, and for the first time in years, tears welled up uninvited. By the following weekend, word had spread. At the corner diner, someone mentioned that a wealthy woman in a Cadillac had been seen near the Carter's place. By Monday, Malik's mother had pieced the story together. She stood on her porch that evening, hands on her hips, watching the sunset fade behind the hills, and when she saw that same Cadillac approach again, she didn't hesitate. "Miss Hayes," she called as Eleanor stepped out. Eleanor froze. "Oh, hello." The woman smiled knowingly. "You think I don't recognize a miracle when I see one? You didn't have to do that for us." Eleanor looked down, embarrassed. "I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," the woman said softly. "You reminded me that kindness still exists. Thank you." That night, Eleanor stayed for dinner. Malik insisted she try his mother's cornbread, the best in all of Kentucky, he claimed, and by the end of the meal, laughter filled the small kitchen. The air was warm, alive with something Eleanor hadn't felt in years, belonging. When she finally stood to leave, Malik walked her to her car. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I know it was you. The envelope." She turned, startled. "What makes you think that?" He grinned faintly. "Because no one else drives a Cadillac in Maple Ridge." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're too smart for your own good." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor became a regular visitor. She taught Malik how to write college essays, brought him old engineering books, even arranged a weekend tour at a technical university nearby. For every act of help she offered, Malik countered with something of his own. Fixing her fence, changing her tires, or simply sitting on her porch and listening as she talked about her late husband. Their friendship, though unusual, became the talk of Maple Ridge. Some admired it. Others whispered. "Old woman trying to buy herself redemption," one voice said at the post office. "She's just lonely," another replied. And maybe they were both right. When spring came, Malik received an acceptance letter from a state college. Full tuition, thanks to a scholarship Eleanor had quietly pulled strings to secure. He rushed to her home, breathless, waving the letter in the air. "I got in. Miss Hayes, I made it." She hugged him tightly, her voice trembling. "I knew you would." For a long moment, they stood in the golden light of the setting sun. An old woman who had everything but connection, and a young man who had nothing but hope. Two lives that shouldn't have crossed, but somehow did. The day Malik left for college, the whole town of Maple Ridge turned out to see him off. His mother stood by the car, tears glistening in her eyes as she straightened his collar for the third time. "You call me every Sunday," she said, half laughing, half crying. Malik nodded. "I will, Mama." Eleanor stood a few steps back, her hands folded in front of her, trying not to show how emotional she felt. She'd been the one to help him get here. The forms, the scholarship, even the dorm supplies neatly packed in the trunk. He turned to her before getting in. "You're the reason I'm here. I'll make you proud, Miss Hayes." 4 months, Eleanor's visits to Maple Ridge slowed. The house that once felt full of life was quiet again. She filled her days with charity meetings and community projects, but nothing replaced the sound of Malik's laughter or the warmth of his mother's kitchen. Still, she told herself it was enough. He was out there, building his future. That was what mattered. Until one afternoon, a letter arrived, not from Malik, but from the college. It was addressed to Eleanor Hayes, marked confidential. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, a polite message thanked her for sponsoring the Carter Scholarship Fund. Her heart dropped. She had asked for anonymity, no names, no credit. Yet somehow, her name had been attached to the donation. Within a week, whispers started. At the diner, people stopped talking when she walked in. One afternoon, Malik's mother called. Her voice was tight, unreadable. "Miss Hayes," she said quietly, "did you pay for Malik's college?" Eleanor froze. There was no graceful way to lie. "Yes, I did. But I only wanted to help." Silence filled the line. "I appreciate it," the woman said finally. "But you should have told us. You made us feel like we did this ourselves." Eleanor sat there long after the call ended, staring at the receiver. She hadn't meant to offend, she only wanted to give back what she'd been given. But intentions, she realized, don't always protect you from consequences. When Malik came home for the holidays, the air between them felt different. He still smiled, still hugged her tight, but there was hesitation now, like something unsaid hung between them. "I didn't know you paid for everything," he said one evening, sitting on her porch. "I thought I earned it." "You did," Eleanor said softly. "You still do." He looked away. "It just feels complicated." Her heart sank. He was right. It was complicated. What started as gratitude had somehow turned into debt. She didn't know how to fix it, so she let the silence fill the space between them. A week before Christmas, Malik's mother fell ill. Eleanor drove through a snowstorm to reach the small county hospital. She found Malik sitting alone in the waiting room, his hands clasped, eyes red from crying. "She collapsed," he said. "Doctors say her heart's weak. She might need surgery." Eleanor's chest tightened. "We'll get her the care she needs. Whatever it takes." He looked up sharply. "You've done enough already." She opened her mouth to argue but stopped. He wasn't angry, just exhausted. He was 17, facing the kind of fear no one that age should carry. And for the first time, Eleanor realized that maybe she wasn't saving him. Maybe she was just trying to save herself. When the doctors finally cleared Malik's mother for surgery, Eleanor offered to cover the costs quietly, through a friend at the hospital. But Malik found out. He confronted her in the hallway, his voice trembling. "Why can't you just let us handle something on our own?" "Because I care," she snapped before she could stop herself. The room fell silent. His face softened. "I know you do," he whispered, "but sometimes caring means letting go." That night, Eleanor sat in her car, watching the snow fall outside the hospital window. She thought about her own son, the one she'd lost decades ago in a car accident. The reason she'd moved to Maple Ridge in the first place. Malik had reminded her of him. The same restless curiosity, the same kindness. She hadn't been trying to replace her son. But in her grief, she had blurred the line between love and redemption. Weeks later, as her health declined, Malik's mother asked for Eleanor. When she arrived, the older woman took her hand and said weakly, "You've been a blessing to us. Don't carry guilt for loving someone who needed it." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I only wanted to do right. And you did," the woman whispered. "You just had to learn it's okay to give, and still let others stand." When she passed away that night, Malik clung to Eleanor's hand as he cried. No more distance. No more pride. Just two people bound by loss, love, and lessons learned the hardest way. 3 years had passed since Malik left Maple Ridge. College had changed him, sharper jawline, deeper voice, a maturity born from hardship. But no matter how far he went, the small town still clung to him like a memory that refused to fade. He visited Eleanor often, even after his mother's passing. She'd become like family, though neither of them ever said the word out loud. The old Hayes house had aged gracefully, its porch still creaking, its air still smelling faintly of coffee and pine. It felt like home, until the night he found the letter. It was tucked beneath a loose floorboard in Eleanor's study, sealed in an envelope yellowed with time. He hadn't meant to find it. He'd only been helping Eleanor move some old boxes when the floorboard shifted beneath his foot. Curiosity made him pry it open. Inside the small hollow space were 3 things: an old photograph, a rusted locket, and that letter. The photo stopped him cold, a young woman holding a baby. The woman looked like Eleanor. But the baby, he looked like him. Heart racing, Malik sat down and tore open the letter. The handwriting was shaky, faded, but still legible. "To whoever finds this, I am sorry. I never meant for things to happen this way. His name is Malik Carter. I gave him up because I thought I couldn't give him a better life. But I never stopped loving him." The room began to spin. He read it again, then again. Every word felt like a hammer to the chest. His mother had always said he was adopted, but the papers never showed from where. She'd told him it didn't matter. But now, it mattered more than anything. Malik drove through the night to confront Eleanor. Rain poured in sheets, blurring the highway lights into streaks of gold and gray. When he reached her house, he barely knocked before pushing open the door. Eleanor sat by the fireplace, her thin frame wrapped in a shawl, startled by his sudden entrance. "Malik?" she asked, standing slowly. "What's wrong?" He held up the letter, his voice shaking. "You tell me." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. Her face went pale, her lips trembling. "You weren't supposed to find that," she whispered. "So it's true?" he demanded. "You're my mother?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes. But I thought I lost the right to tell you that years ago." Eleanor sank into her chair, the truth spilling out like broken glass. She'd been 19 when she had him. Poor, terrified, and alone. Her parents, strict and reputation-obsessed, forced her to give the baby away. The adoption was closed, sealed tight, and she was sent off to college to start over. She'd spent decades searching for him, only to discover by chance that his adoptive family lived in the very county she'd retired to. But by the time she realized who he was, he already had a mother who loved him. "So I stayed quiet," she said through tears. I thought it was better that way. Safer for you. Malik's anger softened into disbelief, confusion, grief. He wanted to hate her, but he couldn't. All those years, the woman who'd helped him, fed him, believed in him, was the same one who'd given him life. He felt both robbed and found at the same time. Later that night, he sat by the fireplace, staring at the old photo again. His mother, his real mother, had been right there, rebuilding what she'd once lost. I should have told you, she whispered. But I was afraid you'd leave. He looked up at her, his eyes soft. You should have trusted that I'd stay. They sat in silence for a long time, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Eleanor reached for the rusted locket that had been hidden with the letter. Inside was a faded picture, baby Malik, wrapped in a hospital blanket. I kept this all these years, she said. It was the only proof I had that you were real. The next morning, Malik packed his things and drove to his mother's grave. He laid the letter beside her headstone, whispering, You'll always be my mom. But now I know where I came from. The wind stirred the leaves around him, almost like a sigh. When he returned to Eleanor's house, she was sitting on the porch, waiting, eyes tired, but peaceful. You're not angry? She asked quietly. He shook his head. No. I think I'm just finally whole. They sat together, watching the sun rise over Maple Ridge, painting the old town gold. The truth hadn't destroyed them, it had freed them both. And somewhere in that small quiet town, the sound of healing finally drowned out the echoes of the past. Spring returned to Maple Ridge with the slow grace of a healing heart. The frost that once covered the fields had melted into soft soil, and wildflowers pushed through the cracks in the old roads. The town itself seemed quieter these days, not somber, but reflective, like a place that had learned to keep its stories close. Eleanor Hayes sat on her porch each morning with a blanket across her knees and a cup of tea cooling in her hand. Time had gentled her, worn away the sharp edges that used to define her life, ambition, regret, fear. Now, she lived in the soft stillness of after. Malik visited often. Not out of obligation but choice. He'd grown into a young man whose voice carried calm authority, whose eyes held both his mother's, the one who raised him and the one who gave him life. When he came home that spring, he brought blueprints rolled under his arm and sawdust clinging to his clothes. I'm building something, he told her one afternoon. Something that'll matter. Eleanor smiled, watching him spread the plans across the porch table. It was a sketch of a community workshop, a place where young people could learn trades, build projects, fix things instead of throwing them away. You're building more than that, she said quietly. You're building second chances. They worked side by side all summer. Malik handled the blueprints, the budgets, the sweat. Eleanor handled the paperwork, the permits, and the quiet encouragement he didn't even know he needed. The townsfolk, once whispering about that odd pair, now came around to help. Hammering, painting, planting trees. By fall, the workshop stood tall at the edge of town, wood-framed, sunlit, and named the Carter Hayes Center for Craft and Innovation. Malik had wanted to name it after his mother, but Eleanor insisted both names stay. 2 lives built this place, she'd said. Let them stand together. On opening day, the town gathered. The mayor gave a short speech, children ran through the doors, and Eleanor, frail now, her health slowly fading, sat in the front row, her eyes glassy with pride. When Malik stepped to the microphone, his voice trembled at first. When I was a kid, he said, I thought kindness was something people gave when they had too much. I thought it was charity. He paused, glancing toward Eleanor. But now I know, real kindness isn't about giving what's easy. It's about giving what costs you something. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's the truth. The crowd was silent. Eleanor's lips trembled with emotion, a tear sliding down her cheek. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Malik and Eleanor walked the empty hall of the workshop. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint filled the air. She stopped beside a wall where a plaque had been hung. For every act of kindness, there is a story, and every story deserves a place to begin again. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Malik turned to her, smiling softly. You do. We both do. They stood in silence, listening to the faint creak of wood as the new building settled, like the earth itself acknowledging what had been made right. That winter, Eleanor's health declined rapidly. She passed peacefully in her sleep, a soft smile frozen on her lips, as if mid-conversation with the son she'd once lost and finally found again. Malik found a note on her desk, written in that same shaky handwriting he once found beneath the floorboards. If love finds you again, let it. Don't question it, don't hide it. Let it mend what it broke. You were my second chance, and my peace. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket, where he kept the rusted locket she'd given him. Then he stepped outside. The morning light spilled across Maple Ridge, painting the rooftops gold. Years later, the Carter Hayes Center became the beating heart of Maple Ridge. Young builders and dreamers came from all over the county to learn, create, and rebuild their lives. On the front wall, next to the plaque, hung two portraits, one of Eleanor, one of Malik's mother. Beneath them, a quote read, "Kindness doesn't erase the past. It redeems it." Malik often stood there alone in the evenings, hands in his pockets, watching the workshop glow under the amber lights. He could almost hear Eleanor's voice in the wind, steady, patient, proud. He smiled faintly, whispering to the empty air, "We did it, Mom." And somewhere beyond the fields, past the fading sound of hammers and laughter, Maple Ridge exhaled, a town that had once been built on loss, now rebuilt on love. If this story moved you, then share it so others can feel it too. Like it and subscribe for more intriguing stories.